third and final edition of Harlem Beat, a community affairs show produced by the journalism class here at City College. I'm your host, Marlene Marte. Tonight we're going to take a critical look at capitalism. We'll examine the fast food workers' strike and look at another currency that's not the dollar or the euro. For our feature story, reporter Laura Bordas will talk to Chris Michael about a business model that is more democratic than corporations. Since the 1970s, prices have gone up, but wages have remained stagnant. Low-wage workers are fed up. Carlos has more.
I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey. Well, I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey. Said I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. And if I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me?
Fast food and retail workers are striking and protesting across the country for a living wage. Most of these workers make only $7.25 per hour, which is the national minimum wage. Companies like Walmart rarely give their employees enough hours to qualify for benefits like health insurance, making them the working poor. According to All Walmart, a group of current and past employees, the average salary of a Walmart associate is about $9 an hour, and most only work 34 hours a week, resulting in a salary of $15,500 per year. This salary is not enough to provide basic necessities like rent, utilities, and food anywhere in America. And since most Walmart associates don't work 40 hours per week, they do not qualify for the company's health insurance plan, and most are on Medicaid. Meanwhile, the Walton family, owners of Walmart, made $27.8 billion in profit this year, while taxpayers subsidize their employees. According to Change Walmart, an advocacy group in support of Walmart employees, up to $1 billion is spent annually by states all across America to subsidize the lowest paid Walmart workers for benefits like food stamps and Medicaid. Fast food workers have been striking all during the holiday season. According to USA Today, on December 5th in New York City, about 100 protesters blew whistles and beat drums as they marched into McDonald's, chanting, "We can't survive on $7.25. Meanwhile, McDonald's CEO Don Thompson received a salary package worth $13.8 million this year. His salary is over 900 times the salary of an average McDonald's minimum wage worker. The majority of minimum wage workers are 28 years old, non-college graduates who lack the skills to obtain white-collar jobs. Those striking demand a starting pay rate of $15 per hour, an annual income of $25,000. While this salary will not be sufficient for a New Yorker to live independently, in other states like Florida, it is possible. Matthew Rosario, a full-time student here at City College, has to live at home even though he works 2 part-time jobs.
It's definitely hard. I'll take the mic. Yeah. It's hard because I'm also tutoring this semester. I'm taking 6 classes, so it's hard balancing out like social and responsibilities and also staying on top of classes. So it's difficult, but I found a balance for it. It's not for everybody, but I feel where I'm at right now, I need extra money to support myself, and I'm living with my mom, so any little bit helps.
Many argue that the federal government is responsible for minimum wage being so low and not corporations. But corporations refuse to raise wages because they could always find people who will work for them out of necessity and desperation. Charmaine Givens Thomas, a 6-year-old Walmart worker in Evergreen Park, Illinois, has started an online petition asking President Obama to meet with employees. According to the Guardian newspaper, the president supports an increase in minimum wage to $10.10 per hour. To sign an online petition to increase the minimum wage to $10.10 per hour, go to moveon.org. This is Carlos Taveras for WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Wow, I agree with these striking workers. Everyone should have the right to have a salary they can live on. Thank you, Carlos. So just what are Bitcoins and how exactly do they work? Kevon has the story.
Money! Get back! I'm on blackjack. Keep your hands off of my stack. Money! It's a hit. Don't get me back. Too good.
Bitcoins, the new experimental cryptocurrency, has been making waves around the world. Last week, an unknown buyer purchased a $103,000 Tesla Model S entirely with Bitcoins. Virgin Mobile head Richard Branson has said that his spaceflight venture Virgin Galactic will accept Bitcoins in the future, and that one such flight has already been bought by a woman using the virtual currency. In the Mediterranean island of Cyprus, the University of Nicosia is now accepting Bitcoin for tuition payments. It seems the once esoteric and highly speculative currency is beginning to reach that step of becoming a more accepted trade form. But, with all the talk about Bitcoins in the news, and for all its newfound uses, buying high-value cars, paying college tuitions, and going to space, a more clear understanding of the currency might be needed. What exactly is a Bitcoin, and how might one get their virtual hands on some? WeUseCoins.com, the community-funded website focused on making Bitcoins more accessible for beginners, has created a short informational video that can start to help us understand what this growing bit phenomena is about.
What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency. Bitcoins are digital coins you can send through the internet. Compared to other alternatives, Bitcoins have a number of advantages. Bitcoins are transferred directly from person to person via the net, without going through a bank or clearinghouse. This means that the fees are much lower, you can use them in every country, your account cannot be frozen, and there are no prerequisites or arbitrary limits. Let's look at how it works. Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody running a free application called a Bitcoin miner. Mining requires a certain amount of work for each block of coins. This amount is automatically adjusted by the network such that Bitcoins are always created at a predictable and limited rate. Your Bitcoins are stored in your digital wallet, which might look familiar if you use online banking. When you transfer Bitcoins, an electronic signature is added. After a few minutes, the transaction is verified by a miner and permanently and anonymously stored in the network. The Bitcoin software is completely open source and anybody can review the code. Bitcoin is changing finance the same way the web changed publishing. When everyone has access to a global market, great ideas flourish. Let's look at some examples of how Bitcoins are already used today. You can purchase video games, gifts, books, servers, and alpaca socks. Several currency exchanges exist where you can trade your Bitcoins for dollars, euros, and more. Bitcoins are a great way for small businesses and freelancers to get noticed. It doesn't cost anything to start accepting them, there are no chargebacks or fees, and you'll get additional business from the Bitcoin economy. For your first Bitcoins and more information, visit WeUseCoins.com.
For even more detailed information about Bitcoin, bit mining, and the like, you can also visit such sites as enbitcoin.it and bitcoin.org. This is Kavan Hunter for WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Thanks, Kavan. I'll take some of those Bitcoins. I want a new car. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, Laura Borders will talk to Chris Michaels about co-ops, an alternative to minimum wage jobs.
Say you want a revolution, well, you know, we all want to change the world.
NCNOC is an association of worker cooperative businesses, academics, activists, lawyers, organizers, and workers. Welcome, Chris, to Harlem Beat. Now tell us, Chris, what is a worker co-op?
Thank you so much for having me, Laura, first of all. Also, because this is Harlem Beat, I'd like to first take an opportunity to say hello to Manhattan Avenue. And I'd also like to say hello to all of the yellow cab drivers out there that might be listening to this show. So a worker cooperative is essentially a business, first and foremost. But most importantly, it's a business that's democratically controlled by the workers who work at the business.
Okay, and how do they differ from other corporations?
So I think to answer this question, if you don't mind, I'd just like to take a step back and talk a little bit about how corporations work, like
Yes.
regular corporations in day-to-day life. So the way corporations work in day-to-day life is that they're controlled by a board of directors. These are people who may or may not work at the business, at the corporation, but they oversee the business. They oversee the corporation. They hire the CEO, they hire the president, and they govern the corporation. Now, in a traditional corporation, in a regular capitalist corporation, the board of directors is selected by the shareholders. And that might sound good, but what happens is that usually just a few major shareholders, major capital holders, or really wealthy investors wind up having the most power in selecting who the board of directors is. You see this in TV shows all the time, like the person who has the 50% stake in the company, 50% investment, meaning the wealthiest person, they get to just choose who the board of directors is, for example. So now a worker cooperative is a business where only the workers get to vote for who the board of directors is going to be. Right? And the workers vote on the basis not of how much money they've invested, but just on the basis of being a human being. One human being, one vote. One worker, one vote.
That makes sense. And who benefits in this situation in co-ops, worker co-ops?
Well, so, there's a lot of benefits that come out of this. Personally, I like to emphasize the benefit that it simply respects human dignity in a way that traditional capitalist corporations, I feel, you might feel differently, but I feel traditional capitalist corporations don't really respect us as human beings and don't really respect our dignity. Traditional capitalist corporations ask us to rent our bodies and our minds on an hourly basis, to go into the workplace, to go into the office, to go into the factory, to go into the restaurant, and basically sell our bodies and our minds to the control of the board of directors, to the control of the wealthy capital holders who control the board of directors. Now, a worker co-op operates on a radically different principle. In a worker cooperative, you're not selling yourself. You're not renting your body and your mind on an hourly basis to be told what to do. Rather, you're working collaboratively and democratically with your fellow colleagues, with your fellow workers. So first and foremost, I think it respects our human dignity.
I understand. And how is the pay divided?
So pay, there's no golden rule for this. But again, worker cooperatives in many ways resemble regular businesses. So, if you work at a worker cooperative, you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You may get a slightly larger bonus at the end of the year, for example. But ultimately, the questions of salaries and pay and bonuses and how the end of the year profits or surplus is divided among the workers, those are questions that are likely going to be decided by the board of directors. And again, who controls the board of directors? The workers.
Perfect. Who supervises co-ops, even though I think you already said that?
Right. So again, worker cooperatives are in many respects resemble regular corporations. In fact, worker cooperatives are corporations. They're a type of corporation. And so, if you have, just like in a large corporation with, let's say, thousands of people working there, you're going to need some system of management, some hierarchy, some people doing work, other people monitoring them, other people reporting back to other levels and integrating the different aspects of the business. So in a worker cooperative, again, you will have supervisors, you will have assistant managers and CEOs. So you'll have a lot of those traditional hierarchy structures. But once again, at the end of the day, all of these people, from the CEO down to the person ringing up the cashier, ringing up the cash register, I should say, they're all workers. And they're all, at the end of the day, treated with the same exact level of respect, and they are all entitled to one vote for the board of directors, for the governance of this business.
Okay, I understand. And who can start a worker co-op?
So, again, worker cooperatives are businesses. So just like anybody can start a business, in theory, anybody could start a worker cooperative business. Now, to say that anybody can start a business or a worker cooperative business is not to say that everybody should necessarily start a worker cooperative business. Right? Starting a business is an extremely intensive process that requires lots of research, salespersonship, lots of knowledge about financing and how to get money, how to make money. And that's not necessarily that's going to be a set of skills that everyone's going to have or be interested in having, right? You might just want to be a nuclear physicist or a rocket scientist or a lawyer. You might not be interested in all those the business side of things. So the short answer is anybody can start a worker cooperative business, but you have to be business-minded, I would say. It's often the case that there's a nonprofit or a sort of an economic development corporation, or we call them in our community, in the worker cooperative community, we call them developers or incubators. There's often kind of like a nonprofit attached to the project that sort of helps mobilize the project, helps bring it together. So in New York City, for example, you have two groups, one in the Bronx, Green Worker Cooperatives, and then you have another one in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, called the Center for Family Life in Sunset Park. And they've each done work to try to sort of get information out there about worker cooperatives and sort of help groups of workers come together and start worker cooperatives. You also have the largest worker cooperative in the country, in the South Bronx, which is called Cooperative Home Care Associates. They do home health. It's a home health care provision, and they have over 2,000 workers. They've been growing exponentially over the last 10 years. And I can't quite recall the name of the nonprofit, but it originally sort of grew out of a nonprofit, from my understanding, from my recollection.
Okay. Now, what about Red Mills? Tell me a little bit about that.
I don't know too much about Red Mill other than I eat it for breakfast every morning. I have this oatmeal concoction that I create out of all Bob's Red Mill products. From my understanding, Bob's Red Mill was started by sort of a very sort of a good-natured guy, somebody who might not necessarily sort of instinctively wanted to start a capitalist business where he controlled and, you know, was able to command other people to do his bidding the way we're forced to do in a capitalist corporation. But he was, I have the feeling that he was sort of a hippie who wanted to bring healthy foods to the public. Now, it just so happens that, and I don't know his full name, but I'm pretty sure his first name is Bob. But from what I understand, Bob, and I say that with all respect, he's retiring, or he was planning on retiring. He sort of had made as much money as he would have liked to have made from the business. He'd been repaid many times over in the sort of the fact that the product was now available to the world, and he felt that the most sensible thing he could do in transitioning the business to new ownership was to transition the ownership of the business over to the workers and to convert his capitalist business into a worker cooperative. And that's something that is gaining in popularity at the moment. The idea that all of the baby boomers who were raised on sort of maybe with more idealistic values, you might say, all of the businesses that they've created in the U.S. over the years, that their children might not be interested in running them, for example, and they might instead like to convert their businesses over to the hands of the workers.
Okay. As we mentioned before, you work for the NYC network of worker cooperatives. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we were founded in December 2009, growing in, I would say, mainly out of the Center for Family Life in Sunset Park. Again, there was a nonprofit that was sort of supporting this, but we were a large group of workers, academics, lawyers, activists who came together and decided to create a local grassroots sort of business association for worker cooperative businesses. And so we've been running for the last 4 years. We've had lots of sort of grassroots meetings, bringing everyone to the table. And we really see ourselves as an awareness building and advocacy organization. We've got our first, we've done lots of sort of little events and trainings, and we have a website, nycworker.coop, and you can find all of the worker co-ops that are in New York City. You can find them online, nycworker.coop.coop. And we're going to have our first really large event, the first annual NYC Worker Cooperative Conference on April 5th, 2014. And it seems to be fairly certain that we're going to be lucky enough to be hosted at CUNY Law School.
Perfect. So anybody can attend that?
And anybody's going to be able to attend that. It's for the general public. That's right.
That's great. Okay. Chicago Windows and Doors was a corporation that was in the news a couple of years ago. And now the company is called New Era Windows and Doors.
Yeah.
Do you know their story? Can you tell us a little bit?
I know a little bit about the story. They were featured in Michael Moore's Capitalism, a Love Story when they were shutting down. Basically, the owners of the factory did some really sort of nasty back dealing and just sort of sucked the money right out of the company. And it was in the news recently that one of the two capitalist business owners who sort of got the money out of the business, he just landed himself a 4-year jail sentence. Now, thankfully, to the good efforts of a group called The Working World, founded by Brendan Martin, who is on the board of Nick-Knock, actually, and as a friend. Brendan and The Working World went in to Republic Windows and Doors and took this group of workers who has now found themselves unemployed because the former business owners had just basically sold them out and sold the business out. Took the factory and the workers, which was perfectly capable of continuing to manufacture high-quality windows and doors, and brought in financing, brought in money. They had some of their own money, but they rallied some other financing from interested parties, and they've reopened the factory, and they're currently up and running, and it's now a worker cooperative.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Can you please tell us a little bit about worker co-ops in other countries such as Spain or Italy?
Absolutely. So, while we're just now learning, I think, in the U.S. about worker cooperatives, especially, for example, through the advocacy of, for example, somebody like Professor Richard Wolff, who's got a program in WBAI, the worker cooperatives are actually quite well known and understood internationally. There is a very interesting case of workplace democracy or worker cooperation in Spain, in particular in the Basque region of Spain. There's a corporation called the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. It has, I think, something over 80,000 workers, and it's essentially one huge sort of mega corporation comprised of many sort of smaller subsidiary corporations, but they're all worker cooperatives, and it's all sort of one big federation or confederation of worker cooperatives. In Italy, worker cooperation or worker cooperatives aren't as centralized in Italy, but rather they're sort of spread throughout the country, and in particular in the Emilia-Romagna province. But I think Italy is a really fantastic model for how worker cooperatives can grow with the help, for example, of government. So you have a city like Bologna in Italy, where the city of Bologna, the government actually contracts out a lot of its social services. Actually, about 80 or 90% of its social services are contracted out through worker cooperative businesses, right? So imagine New York City. And New York City sometimes perhaps might have to, contract with, or the state might, for example, have to contract out to social service providers like, healthcare provision, medical care provision. Instead of doing this through the private sector, they can contract out through worker cooperative businesses. So you can have a sort of mutual aid relationship between our democratic state, our democratic government, and these democratic businesses.
Okay.
I should also say that about 5% of the working population of Italy are members of worker cooperatives.
Where can people find more information if they want to learn about worker co-ops?
Absolutely. So I would first and foremost advise that you go to the website of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. That's a national grassroots worker cooperative business association, and their website is usworker.coop, usworker.coop. There's lots of information there, lots of resources. If you want more information about sort of the local scene in New York City, you can again go to Nick-Knock's website, which is nycworker.coop. Again, nycworker.coop.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Michael, and we hope to see you back on Harlem Beat. Marlene, back to you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Mr. Michael, for educating us on co-ops. And thank you for listening to the 3rd edition of Harlem Beat. This show was produced by the radio journalism class here at the City College of New York, taught by Professor Angela Harden. Our video news director is Edward J. Harris. Board operator is Joan Infante, assisted by WHCR's production manager Tina Dixon. Our reporters are Carlos Taveras and Kavan Hunter. Our feature reporter is Laura Bordes. Our cameramen are Georgia Stefos, Crystal Somar, and Richard Dreyer. Gustavo Reese is our director. Technicians are Johnson Pun and John Avante. I'm your host, Marlene Marte. Thank you so much for tuning in. Same beat, same time, same channel. Good night, Harlem.